Welcome to the TMRN Time Monk Radio Network. I'm Jules, and today's the 11th of March 2011. On this eventful day, we have former Green Beret and researcher Mr. John Moore. John's website is thelibertyman.com. Hi, John. Welcome.
Jules, good to be here. Thank you.
Well, thank you for taking our invitation up. The WebBot Forum administrator is Fox, and today he'll be doing the recording and technical support of the show. Several members of the forum were kind enough to join us tonight. They include members Chuck, Dead Poet, Diane B, Gem D, Lua, Big Medicine, and Romans 828. For listeners, this interview will assume you have a fairly good understanding of Mr. Moore's work, including his video series Global Warming, What the Government Isn't Telling You, as well as his vast array of presentations and interviews on YouTube and his radio shows. This video will be available on YouTube for free on the WebBot Forum channel. The website is webbotforum.com. John, are you all ready to go, sir?
I am ready to go.
Fantastic. Okay, the first question we had for you, John, is as a timing for Phase 2, you stated that abrupt climate change, bizarre weather, earthquakes, tidal waves will become so numerous they become daily news. With Christchurch, New Zealand, and now the Japanese 8.9 earthquake and tsunami, in your opinion, are we in Phase 2 now?
Well, you need to remember, everybody, that I wrote that in the fall of 2005, and I published it in January 2006. I was prognosticating, to the best of my ability, what would be happening in the future, which is both dangerous and difficult. I made up those phases to give people that would be reading it in the future, of course the future is now, something to kind of be aware of and be looking for in general terms. Beginning about January of last year, 2010, we started seeing these events become daily news. That's accelerating now, apparently. Weather events, seismic events, volcanism, all of are taking and becoming daily major news stories. I'm old enough to recall, and anybody probably 40 years or older is old enough to remember when volcanoes and earthquakes were rare events in the news, something you might see maybe a couple of times a year. We're way past that now, aren't we, gentlemen? Unfortunately. So yes, I would say we're in what I've termed Phase 2. It's just not a scientific term. It's just a term to help people kind of get a feel for where we are. And yes, we are in Phase 2.
John, obviously with the events that has happened in the last 24 hours, and I believe you were talking about it in your radio show, how have you got feet on the street or intel on how bad it is in Japan, and also this very serious section on the reactors there melting down? Have you got any further information on that?
I had a caller on my show this morning. He is the man, when he's on duty at the nuclear power plant he works on the East Coast, he's the man in charge of the entire plant during his shift. It's a lot of responsibility. He went into some detail about the safeguards built into these plants and how the men operating these things in Japan have the same authority he does to shut these things down independently if they feel there's some risk of a failure or disaster of some sort, which gave me a little bit of peace of mind. I was wondering, how much authority these people had. Apparently, one of the 3 reactors in Japan is already releasing radioactive material in the atmosphere. That reached the West Coast as quickly as 2 days. Don't know yet how much. We just know it is. There's a lot of unknowns here. The 2 other reactors, they believe they have them under control. That remains to be seen. I interviewed a couple of people that their parents were around the 3 Mile Island event. The people I interviewed were children at the time, but they live up there near Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, where this all happened 30 years ago. And apparently 3 Mile Island was a lot closer to a complete meltdown than the general public has any idea of. And it's the nature of these governments and these big companies to conceal an event like that from the public if they can do so. That's probably what's happening in Japan right now.
Thanks, John. Just another quick follow-up. Obviously, I believe I just watched a news article on Hillary Clinton sending the Air Force actually to help with some coolants for the reactor. Do you get a sense from your contacts how serious the situation could be?
Well, it is very serious, and this is a big world. Having a C-141 or a C-130, I don't know what they're using, a C-17, these things take almost better part of 24 hours to get across the Pacific Ocean, depending on where they're coming from, Alaska or the East Coast. For them to do that means it's very serious. They're taking it seriously. Apparently there was some miscommunication at first about whether we were even sending this stuff, but it looks like we are right now, right? Is that correct, Jules?
Oh, I believe,
I believe we are. So. It's a serious matter, and it'll affect the entire Northern Hemisphere. And, of course, the Southern Hemisphere will have indirect effects because of what's going on. It affects the Northern Hemisphere. These weather patterns tend to stay north of the equator or south of the equator, depending on where the event takes place. So we're certainly at risk here in North America from getting radiation from Japan.
Thank you for that. Just another quick follow-up. From your inside sources, when do you expect Phase 3 to begin? Previously, you mentioned that the military's aim in relocating to Colorado was to have the relocation completed by December 2010. Does your inside sources confirm they have now completed their relocation?
The major parts are done. They continue to work, as you might expect. In fact, in the fall of 2009, they announced the beginning of a major project to relocate the computer data center from Fort Meade, Maryland. This is a National Security Agency, NSA, from Fort Meade, Maryland to 20 miles south of Salt Lake City. That project is ongoing right now as we speak. So yes, they've completed the major things, and they continue to do major things, even past the deadline they gave themselves, which was December 31st, 2009. And I imagine they'll be making preparations and doing things up to the last moment. As to your question about when Phase 3 will begin, I'm not giving out any dates. I'm getting things thrown at me from my various sources, sources that are reliable on one hand, on the other, they're not that reliable. Professor McCanney has an excellent quote in one of his books. I think it may be his book on surviving Planet X. A lady was asking him to give her a date. And he says, ma'am, I'm kind of paraphrasing here. What will you do once I give you a date? Buy another case of tuna fish? People want dates. They're looking for them. They're seeking them. It's a time frame, Jules. And we're in the time frame. The federal government, the United States, and other major governments spent better part of 20 years or more getting ready for these events. Common folks like you and I and the rest and the people listening, we obviously don't have 20 years. We obviously don't have untold tens of millions of dollars. People would be well advised to pay heed, do their research. You know, I'm a researcher. I'm a homicide detective. I'm no scientist. Do your own independent research. These things are far too important to take my word for it. Do your research, verify this is real, and then begin your preparations as soon as possible. And don't worry about a specific date. When the Navy veterans were at these classified briefings, they were just told, gentlemen, when you retire, move to the Arkansas, Missouri Ozarks. They were told, gentlemen, these events will happen in your lifetime, not your children's, not your grandchildren's. These events will happen in your lifetime. And they weren't giving any specific date, not even a very specific timeline, other than that would happen during their lifetimes.
Yeah, I agree. And I guess many people on the forum here, definitely people that are preparing right now. Chuck, you have a question for John?
Yes. Good to meet you, John. Glad we're getting to chat with you. I've been a follower of yours for a number of years. You mentioned on your global warming movie, I know it was a little early in our timeline now, that the coastlines would start flooding. Based on the recent data that we're now seeing, Indonesia is still underwater currently due to, I assume, land subsidence.
Right.
we're starting to see exceptionally high tides along the east coast of the United States, especially this last fall. We were seeing 3-foot high, exceptionally high tides. When are we going to start seeing true high tides along the coastline of the United States, along the Gulf, Pacific, stuff like that?
You know, these oceans coming out of their basins will not be, a normal high tide. It's not going to be due to melting ice in Greenland or melting ice in the Antarctic. This will be due to a pole shift, something that will disrupt the rotation of the Earth. There's a bulge of water. Now, I know many of you already know this, but we need to do some any good journalist should make no assumption that your audience knows what you're talking about. Sea levels measured at Cornwall, England. It's been measured there for more than 2 centuries. They basically took a big rock at the edge of the ocean, put a horizontal line on it, and said that this is sea level. Once you get near the equator, and actually within 1,000 miles north and south of the equator, there's a bulge of water not quite 500 feet above that mark in Cornwall, England. That bulge of water is held in place by gravity and the rotation of the Earth. Anything that disrupts the rotation of the Earth will disrupt that bulge of water. That's where the water is going to come from, ladies and gentlemen. It will be a violent, very quick event. Won't be talking about a 3-foot tidal wave or a 33-foot tidal wave like we had in Japan today. We'll be talking about waves 100, 200, maybe even 300 feet high, coming inland on the East Coast at least 100 miles.
Thanks, John, for that. Lou, have you got a question for John?
Yes, I do. Hello, John. I appreciate you giving us the interview tonight.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions about the future map scenario. I've read on some of the websites that I visited that the source for the Navy map was Edgar Cayce. It appears that Edgar Cayce did not actually visually portray a map, but rather verbally described areas of the country that would be underwater in the future. Do you know the source for the Navy map, and did Edgar Cayce's talks have any connection to this map?
Okay, I'll tell you what I know, Lou, and then we'll just have to.
Okay.
What I know is I've debriefed about 24 Navy veterans. Most of them were veterans of the submarine corps. There was one intelligence officer from another service who did a 3-year tour of duty with the submarine corps. Only one Army guy. I've only debriefed one Army guy. He was a command sergeant major who'd seen the map. But the rest of them were Navy guys. They saw the classified map in these briefings. And the men I debriefed, Lou, they were not the scientists. They were the guys sitting in the folding chairs in the audience. They weren't told who or how the map was created. They were just told this will be the new coastlines of North America. So that's as much as I know, is that the U.S. Navy has been holding out this map. Now, here's an interesting part of it, a kind of a subplot. One of my listeners to my Sunday show, he got a copy of my DVD. He watched it. He called me up, and he says, John, I saw your map. I said, really? He says, yeah, I was a young sailor. It was 1979. I was setting up a briefing room in New Orleans for a bunch of admirals for a weekend briefing. And he says, John, admirals don't do weekend briefings. So he sets up the chairs, the sound system, the lights, and so forth. And he saw the map on the wall, but since he was not in the briefing, he never knew what it meant until he watched my DVD 30 years later. He says, John, these admirals showed up. They're smoking cigars, slapping each other on the back. How's the wife? How's the family? Joking and cutting up. He said when they left that briefing, they all looked like their puppy dog died. And for 30 years, he did not know what went on in that briefing room until he saw my map. Now, there's about 20 or so maps, Lou, done by psychics that you can see on the internet. There's Edgar Cayce's, there's Gordon Michael Scallion's, there's probably 17 or 18 others. Probably Scallion's map is better known than Cayce's map, and quite frankly, I haven't seen Cayce's map. If it's similar to the Navy's map, then so be it. I don't know that the U.S. Navy would rely on something from a psychic. The United States Navy is known to have some of the best scientists that there are when it comes to oceanography and astronomy, both. So I don't know that they would be dependent on anything done by Edgar Cayce. They would most likely create their own map based on their own research.
Okay. Well, when I've been looking at the maps, and I've studied a lot of them too, the Navy map and the KC map are the closest to each other. They all have some of the same elements and some of the same features, but
Right.
those two are very close.
Right.
In studying the map, it sure does look to me like areas of Missouri and Arkansas near the Ozark Mountains will be underwater.
Yes.
And when water enters a new area permanently, it doesn't usually just cover the eventual high water mark, but it goes considerably beyond that point during
Right.
the crisis, and then it settles back down to its new level. That would indicate that with the water level so close to the Ozarks, it could go considerably higher into those hills. And it's also been proposed that that the cause of these changes will be a massive earthquake in the New Madrid fault zone. So why would the Navy have this area targeted as a good survival site when it is so close to that earthquake zone?
Okay, well, that's an excellent set of questions there. These men were told in the briefings that the Arkansas, Missouri Ozarks could become a series of islands. You know, and when I say series, it would be literally hundreds, if not thousands, of islands. Missouri has more bridges, Lua, than any state in the United States, and it's not even close to being the largest state. The majority of those bridges, of course, are in the Ozarks regions. The majority of these bridges are also what we call low water bridges here, which typically there are several good-sized pieces of culvert pipe with a concrete slab, or maybe just a bridge that's maybe 3 feet above a good-sized creek. All it takes is for this water to come up 3 to 5 feet, and you would create islands all over the Ozarks just by having the water come up 5 feet. Now, here's what the Navy says about the New Madrid seismic zone. They say that first of all, that the Mississippi River will be 50 to 100 miles wide, 100, 200 feet deep. And when that weight of that water is bearing down on the New Madrid seismic zone, it will trigger at least 3 9-point plus earthquakes. That's a direct quote from the Navy classified briefings. Now, if you look at a FEMA map of the regions that are going to be destroyed and devastated by the New Madrid seismic zone, you'll see they have it Region 1, Region 2, and Region 3, and so forth. Most of the worst destruction and damage goes north, south, and east. It doesn't go very far west at all. Once you get about 50 miles west of New Madrid, you're already into Region 2, which is basically where the Ozarks begins. The New Madrid seismic zone is really outside of the Ozarks as far as Missouri is concerned. It comes a bit into the Arkansas side of it. It's a whole different terrain, very quickly going west, and a whole different kind of rock. And the kind of rock you've got determines on how efficiently the energy is transmitted. Here in the Midwest, our rock, and even going east, transmits the energy very efficiently. In California, if you're 50 or 100 miles from an earthquake, you're probably not going to feel it. But here, you could be 500 or 600 miles east of the New Madrid seismic zone, and it'll ring your church bells, because it's done that before. In the period of winter of 1811, 1812, there were hundreds of earthquakes on the New Madrid seismic zone. 3 of them strong enough to ring church bells back east, and 1 of them strong enough to make the Mississippi River run backwards for more than a day. Its power almost beyond belief. If you've ever seen the Mississippi River, to even conceive backwards is breathtaking. So, let's get to your question. Why would the Navy do this? Okay. There is some risk of some water being in the Ozarks. Most of the Ozarks will not have a problem. Low-lying areas could have a problem. The Arkansas, Missouri Ozarks has no major cities. The largest city is Springfield, Missouri, about 250,000 people. The major metropolitan areas are nearby are St. Louis, Kansas City, and Memphis, none of which are in the Ozarks. The population of the Arkansas, Missouri Ozarks is mostly white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, very few minorities of any ethnic group, almost no Muslims, very few blacks, and a sprinkling of American Indians, and almost no Asians. The men and women who live in the Ozarks think that hunting and fishing is God's gift to men and women. And if a local boy was to bring a shotgun or rifle in his pickup truck to high school and leave it parked on the parking lot during classes, that's thought of as normal. Mm-hmm. It's a whole different culture down here. When there's deer season, many businesses and some of the schools shut down because nobody shows up. Probably half the families have a garden of some kind. Many families have chickens and goats and cattle, of course. There's a strong culture of being independent down here. And for all those reasons, a long growing season, plenty of water, distance from major population centers, a relatively short, relatively mild winter. That's why the Navy designated the Arkansas, Missouri Ozarks.
Well, have there been enough people moving into the Ozarks from other areas to start changing that culture, that local culture you're talking about?
Not really. We're always on the lookout for Californians, but other than that, not really. It's a huge, it's a vast area. One county in Missouri is larger than the state of Rhode Island. It's a fairly good sized state. You know, Texas County, Missouri is larger than the state of Rhode Island, the entire state. And that's just one county in the Ozarks. It's a vast area of tens of thousands of square miles.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thanks, John. The information you just stated, the military must have got that information from somewhere. I mean, we do know there's reports that the military had this secret remote viewing division, etc. In regards to that, do you think the government is aware of something that's about to occur? Obviously, there's a NLE, National Level Emergency Drill, that's about to occur. They've had this, they've been looking for MREs for a possible New Madrid. Do you think the government's aware that something imminent is about to occur there?
Well, you may be referring, Jules, to contracts that they put up for bid in late in December, early in January. Meals to feed 7 million survivors of a shake on a New Madrid site. In us barefoot hillbillies, we call it the New Madrid seismic zone, by the way, not New Madrid.
Yep.
And that's a local thing. But 7 meals to feed 7 million refugees for, I believe it was 10 days or 2 weeks. Blankets for 7 million refugees. Trainers to train people to rescue folks trapped under steel reinforced concrete buildings that have collapsed. Underwater body bags, which I didn't know there was such a thing until January. Apparently it's a heavier fabric with a closing mechanism that doesn't allow liquids to get back out. There's no precedence for ordering these meals and blankets regarding the New Madrid seismic zone. FEMA's known about it since FEMA was created. FEMA took over from Civil Defense. There's nothing new about the New Madrid seismic zone being at risk. What's new is buying up these food and blankets and getting ready for something. Do they know something? Well, it certainly looks like they do. These drills, they do periodically. The closer you get to New Madrid, Missouri, the more you find county sheriffs and chiefs of police, fire chiefs, paramedic leaders, all very, very aware of the threats posed by the New Madrid seismic zone.
Thank you. Jim, do you have a question for John?
Yeah, hi, John. So nice to meet you.
Good to meet you. And you are Jim D?
Yes, Jim D, Jim Dye.
Jim Dye, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, here's the question. Do you have any information on the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico and if it is still leaking?
Well, I haven't been following what's going on right now all that much, and it's difficult to get much information out of there. If anybody has been checking into it, they probably know that. But the Gulf of Mexico does play a big role in the Gulf Stream stopping, and maybe that bears looking into and talking about a bit. My article at my website, The Gulf Stream Has Stopped, mentions it being the second most important story in 2,000 years, which of course it is. In my paper I wrote in January of 2006, No Need for Panic, I warned the Gulf Stream is at risk of stopping 5 to 20 years in the future, and it had already lost 35% of its mass and velocity. Well, 5 years into the future happened in June of 2010. A very weak, very fragile, very much at risk Gulf Stream was brought to a stop by the British Petroleum oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. There was a university level, 100 feet long, of fairly cold, Anyway, they take a tank of fairly cold water, 100 feet long, 8 by 8 feet, salt water, and they inject fairly warm salt water at one end, about 20 degrees warmer, 30 degrees warmer, and it moves as a right through there, forming a thermal barrier. The warm water will move right through the cold water. If you put oil in the mix, the thermal barrier between the warm water and cold water breaks down, and the warm water will no longer move from one end to the other. It just mixes in with the cold water. According to the scientists I've talked to, that's what happened in June of 2010. The British petroleum oil spill put enough water into what they call the Gulf Loop current to break the Gulf Loop current. That in turn took enough mass and velocity out of the Gulf Stream to stop the Gulf Stream altogether. And in my article at my website, I have the link to the U.S. Navy website where they have the sea surface temperatures. The U.S. Navy publishes a brand new map every 24 hours showing sea surface temperatures all over the planet. You can see the Gulf Stream coming up the east coast of Florida, past Georgia, South Carolina. At Cape Hatteras, North Carolina, it starts going east. It used to go all the way up to Long Island, but now it starts going east at Cape Hatteras. It goes out a couple hundred miles and starts doing this loop-to-loop eddy thing and basically stops before it gets more than a couple hundred miles out into the ocean. That's why last summer Moscow had the worst summer in 1,000 years. That's why this winter Moscow's having the worst winter in 1,000 years. They've got records going back to the year 1010. There's not many places on the planet that have that, but they do.
Right.
Yes. Great Britain, England, Ireland, and Scotland had the worst winter since they've kept records. You may have seen the photographs of people in Ireland lined up to get fresh water at government watering points. They don't bury the pipes deep enough to deal with serious winter in the United Kingdom. They've never had to. Charles de Gaulle Airport was partly closed down in December because they thought the roof would collapse from a snow load. They didn't engineer or design a snow load for the Charles de Gaulle Airport because it doesn't snow in Paris.
Right. Yeah.
So, and here's the deal, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Zangari, Dr. Luigiani Zangari, the PhD scientist that we interviewed extensively for the last 2 weeks of July 2010. Here's a direct quote from him. The Gulf Stream is a pacemaker of the climate of the planet. Now, up until I met Dr. Zangari, I thought, like most people think, the Gulf Stream affected the weather of the East Coast of the United States, the United Kingdom, and Western Europe, and Scandinavia. I had no idea its impact on the jet stream. It was a regulating factor, past tense, a regulating factor on the jet stream. That 200-mile-an-hour wind that's up above us, no matter where you are, it makes our weather do what it does. With that regulating factor gone, weather has become quite unpredictable. And agriculture needs predictable weather. They need to know there's going to be not too much, not too little rain, not too much, not too high or low of temperatures. That predictability is not quite completely gone, but not far from it. And that's being reflected in the Chicago Board of Trade's grain trading futures prices. They're going through the roof, literally, up 200%, 300%, depending on which grain you're looking at and how far out. This past fall, Russia publicly announced they were not going to honor futures contracts for grains that had already been sold. Ukraine did the same thing. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that is not an act of war on one hand. On the other, it's about an inch away from an act of war. That's how serious not honoring grain futures contracts is. But they did the right thing. They kept them for their own people. The United States has been the most resilient to these problems in agriculture, but we're having our problems as well. Western Kansas is in eastern Colorado, extreme drought. Louisiana is having extreme drought. And there's isolated pockets all over North America having very difficult weather-related events.
Right. All right. Thank you, John.
Okay.
Thanks, John. Yeah, and I think the big freeze in Mexico is apparently going to push prices 400, 500% up.
Yeah, the only saving grace there, Jules, is Mexico doesn't have seasons typically. Usually 365 days a year they can be growing fruits and vegetables with no winter. What happened it's been almost 2 months ago now, is a quite bizarre incident, but they will get fresh vegetables and fruits planted and be harvesting them in the next few weeks. It's just the nature of having a place that's almost warm. That's warm almost all the time, I should say. That freeze down there was a truly bizarre event, and they'll recover from that. But we're entering, and we started talking out in this conversation about phase 2. Agriculture is becoming very, very scary all over the planet. Growing grains, fruits, vegetables, whatever it is. Everything's at risk. Everything's on the table, and we will continue to see increasing prices for the foreseeable future.
Thank you, John. Chuck, you have a follow-up question?
Yes, sir. This is something that's always nagged on me, John, because there's been so much discrepancy about it. But I'm kind of curious about your opinion on it. Do you think the BP oil disaster was an intentional act to speed along world events?
Well, I live in a world of evidence, Chuck, and there's no evidence of that. The evidence we do have is that it was well known in those areas of expertise when it comes to drilling oil. It was well known in those areas of engineering that salt dome was risky business. That salt dome has been known for decades to be a massive, probably a century's worth of oil in that one salt dome. That's well known and has been well known for decades. It's also been well known that the pressures inside that salt dome are beyond our current technology, our current engineering to handle. Apparently what they were doing was attempting to drill at the edge of it, at the edge of the salt dome, thinking, well, maybe the pressure won't be quite so bad here, and we'll be able to contain it, and our great-great-grandchildren will be fabulously wealthy as long as, seriously, generational wealth. That's what they were looking at, getting their hands on. They took the risk, and of course they failed. I don't have evidence that it was intentional. I don't know. And something we hear about in the Patriot community frequently is, they want to declare martial law. They built FEMA camps to round up the Patriots and the conservatives and the Tea Party people, and they want to declare martial law. Well, martial law hurts them just like it hurts us. At some point they will declare martial law when they have no choice. Martial law disrupts daily commerce. The powers that be need FedEx and UPS and the mail service to get their spare parts to them just like you and I do. It's not a fun thing. It's not a good place to be. Obviously and clearly, when these events get bad enough, or there's a nuclear device goes off in a major city, or the economy gets so bad that there's rioting in the streets, of course they'll declare martial law. But I don't believe they'll do it before they need to.
See, that's what I kind of agree with you there, John. There's going to be more chaos than there will be order. Yeah. Well, I will hand you back to Jules. Thank you very much for that answer. I appreciate that.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thanks, Chuck. And hopefully they didn't bite off more than they can chew. Apparently there's a big methane bubble in the Gulf. The next question from Big Medicine.
Hello, Mr. Moore. I really appreciate taking your time out to speak with us tonight, and I also really appreciate all the work you do on your radio show.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Mr. Moore, what do you know about the synthetic microbes that were released in the Gulf of Mexico that were claimed to supposedly eat the oil, and what effects that's going to have on the ecosystem and, of course, people?
Well, I'll make a general observation. It's really a bit outside my expertise. Anytime you mess with Mother Nature, sometimes you get unintended consequences. Sometimes they're good unintended consequences. For example, since we're talking about preparedness, or at least we should be, there's a plant called kudzu, which if you drive through Georgia and some places down south, you can drive for miles and see this stuff covering hillsides. It's a parasitic plant from Asia. It's a vine that grows, and once it gets established, Roundup won't kill it. It's really tough stuff, but I found out last summer you can eat this stuff. It's a very nutritious, starchy food. A doctor friend of mine, she grew up in Hong Kong, and she told me she ate it almost every day as a child before they left China. So sometimes these events, these man-made or tampering with Mother Nature can really have a good consequence. The synthetic things that were released in the Gulf of Mexico, I'm not sure that anybody knows what the outcome's going to be. I'm not sure that there's enough microbes to eat up a foot deep of oil in the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico. It sounds like an awful large volume for these microbes to be chewing on. Maybe they multiply to the point where they can do that, and then what? Do they die off, or do they start eating on something else?
Indeed. I'm sure we won't see the effects for quite a while. Thank you so much, John, for that answer.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, John. And as you mentioned, foraging will be a very important skill to learn in the future. Lua, do you have a question for John?
Yes, I do have another one. John, mainstream media keeps on telling us that they're constantly reassuring the public that the Gulf Stream is still flowing in its usual pattern. What do you think can be done to make this information that it has stopped open and available to the public?
Well, it is available to the public. They don't know it exists. The U.S. Navy website is open to anybody who clicks onto it. People simply don't know about it or how to do it. I've got my reach. You've got your radio show you're doing here tonight. What we call Patriot Radio or alternative media reaches a fairly small percentage of people. There's Coast to Coast, which there's a lot of debate about the real motivations of Coast to Coast. I've talked to Professor McCanney about this at length. I think one of the things that they do on Coast to Coast is to take real scientific information like from Professor McCanney, and they mix it in with people being abducted by aliens to make it all seem like it's a real fantasy and nothing to be paid attention to seriously. That may be the real agenda of Coast to Coast. But they have a huge audience. They have the largest nighttime audience in the country.
I suppose that you could sort of assume that the aliens are real, and then, you got the whole thing real, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, sure. Okay, how fast do you think climate changes will turn the northern part of the northern hemisphere into an ice block? Do you have any idea what kind of climate change would be expected in other parts of the planet? Because of the stoppage of the Gulf of Mexico. Right. I mean, the Gulf Stream is what I'm saying.
Right. I'll tell you what we know for sure, and then as I'm on the witness stand a lot, and I would ask the attorney, do you want my sworn speculation? We believe that what's happening right now is either the beginning of a mini ice age. A mini ice age could be 3 to 10 years, maybe as long as 5 or 6 decades, or a full-blown ice age, which could go on for many centuries. That appears to be the case. It'll be several years before even that's definite, at least for us non-scientists. We don't have access to the JPL secrets and NASA secrets. I recommend people watch the film The Day After Tomorrow, and they have the hero in there is a paleontologist who specializes in weather. There really are such men and women who study ancient weather in the hopes of gaining something that will help us figure out what's going to happen in the future. The work product of people like that is not open to the public. So what we're left with is observing what we can observe. Pipes freezing in Ireland in the ground because they're not buried deep enough. This winter was the worst in centuries. We'll be watching carefully the following one and so forth. Other things can and will take place before that as well. We're looking at a planetary-sized object coming deeper into our solar system, and that's going to change everything. The Gulf Stream stopping by itself is changing everything. it's such a major thing. Now, I wasn't aware of, this is Lua, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay. I've got to keep track of the players here. I wasn't aware, Lua, that if the mainstream media was doing anything about the Gulfstream, claiming it's operating or otherwise. Is that happening on the evening news?
It's happening in some of the mainstream media. Whenever there has been the claim that it has stopped, there have been these nice scholarly sounding, oh no, everything is fine. The Gulfstream is running the way it's supposed to. I've seen it written 3 or 4 times.
Well,
this winter.
Okay, I'm just going in through my head here what that means. The fact that they're even recognizing that it needs to be addressed tells me a lot.
Mm-hmm. It sure does.
Taking it seriously, they're not ignoring it. Too many people in high school and college science classes came to figure out what the Gulfstream is and how important it is. They can't ignore something that big. And the outreach that people like myself and Professor McCanny and Dr. Zangari and Zangari doesn't have any outreach. He's a pretty private guy. Dr. Deagle, we reach out to the ones that we can, and word of mouth is sometimes one of the best ways to spread information like this. We've got these marvelous inventions like YouTube and the Internet to spread the word from person to person. And yes, we're reaching tens of thousands of people, but what's tens of thousands of people compared to 350 million? Not very many. Not very many.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Lua. Hopefully we can have the advantage of the internet for a little while longer. Diane, you've got a question for John?
Yes, I do. And hello to you, John, and thank you for all the wonderful stuff that you're doing. What I want to know is, in another part of the world really, do you have any intel on what's happening in the Gulf of Aden with regards to the possibility of a portal being located there?
Explain what you mean by a portal.
As in, the only other word I could think of would be a Stargate, a place where people can go to other dimensions, other places.
Sure, you
yes, I do.
You want to go in that
yes,
rabbit hole
I do.
tonight?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Well, you need to watch. There's a book also, the Philadelphia Experiment. You need to watch the film or read the book, preferably both.
Very familiar with that. Yes. Okay.
A very good friend of mine, when he started out in engineering in the mid-1970s, he worked with 2 men who were part of the Philadelphia Experiment. And these men were basically under non-disclosure agreements under threat of death, basically. But they became close enough friends and trusted each other that they told my friend about what went on in the Philadelphia Naval Yard 30 years before. Because when my friend was working with them, it had only been 30 years, 35 years since the Philadelphia Naval Yard experiment. The United States Navy took the Eldridge, which was a U.S. Navy warship, full-size warship, with several dozen men on it. I don't know how many dozen, but a crew of men. And they filled this thing up with vacuum tubes and ran a cable out to it. They created the largest modern electromagnetic field that had ever been created up to that point in time. The object of the experiment was to make the ship invisible to radar. Well, it not only made it invisible to radar, it made it invisible. It made it go someplace else instantly. It went to another port hundreds of miles away and came back. And when it came back, the men, some of them had pieces of their body stuck in the steel. All of them had severe psychological problems, and 1 or 2 of them were gone. Just the men who survived spent the rest of their natural lives in psychiatric wards, apparently. And there's what we believe happened is the ship not only traveled in a distance, it also traveled in time. The men came back talking about televisions that had screens 4 feet wide. Of course, TV screen in 1943 was 6 inches wide. And other things that they saw while they were gone that did not exist for 40 years in the future. Now, the U.S. Navy stumbled upon that technology inadvertently in 1943. Once that's happened, of course, they're not about to walk away from it. Fast forward about 40 years to Texas and the superconducting supercollider. They built the world's largest machine, literally the world's largest machine, to create the world's largest electromagnetic field. And allegedly to get subatomic particles spinning on this 23 or however many miles diameter circle in opposite directions so they would hit each other and they could take pictures. I'm serious. That's what they told the public. I mean, it stretches credibility. My inside information, Diane, is that when they announced they were mothballing this place, that they still had more PhD physicists working there than any place on Earth. It's probably still in operation. They've built a new one, of course, in Switzerland. Basically the same thing, maybe not quite as big, to allegedly do the same thing. Get subatomic particles spinning in opposite directions so they can hit and take pictures of them. So I don't know about a portal in the Gulf of Aden. I do know that the U.S. Navy and the U.S. government has been working diligently on these things since 1943 in an attempt to have a way to create and control these events as opposed to having them in out of control matter that happens that they can't quite figure out why it's going on or how to control it. They're probably at a point where they can do it. Of course, it's highly classified. I don't know what they've accomplished.
Wow. Thank you very much.
Okay. I just watched the Philadelphia Experiment 2 the other night, by the way. Now that's pure fiction there, I hope anyway. But it's a good film.
It was done with a lower budget, I think, as well. John, Robert Felix's work shows periodic, approximately 11,500 year periods of magnetic wandering or reversals, as well as ice ages. His research has also found scientific evidence showing that oceans actually retreat from the coasts and not submerge the coasts, as the waters freeze to form the massive ice on the continents. Do you think that's a possibility?
Well, it's a possibility, and we have evidence of these continents being washed over with waves. If you go out to these big flat rocks out in Arizona, we call them mesas, you'll find seashells on top of the mesas. Plenty of evidence of the oceans being far, far higher, at least for a few days, at least with one big wave, nothing, if not more, in the past. That 11,500 year time frame is kind of interesting for a number of reasons. One of them, of course, is the Black Knight satellite, which scientists estimate has been up for about 12,000 years. The written traditions in India give extensive documentation of machines that fly, atomic weapons, and things that we're only now capable of putting together. If you go to that part of Pakistan that's Kashmir, where the nice sweater comes from, between Pakistan and India, the local souvenir shops, they sell little trinkets commemorating the nuclear device, or devices, plural, that were set off there 12,000 years ago. If you go to Saudi Arabia, you'll find an area of Saudi Arabia in the desert where there's hundreds of acres of green glass, which before August of 1945, we could not conceive how in the world can the Saudi Arabian desert have the temperature of the surface of the sun, 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit. That's what it takes to melt sand and have it turn into glass. 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, how could that possibly happen? Well, we all found out twice in August 1945 in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. There's lots of evidence of high technology having been on this planet in the distant past. Plenty of evidence. The Black Knight satellite is one of the main parts of that evidence. I have determined to my own satisfaction every U.S. senator is aware of the Black Knight satellite. Probably most of the long-term congressmen, of course, the presidents and vice presidents are. The Black Knight satellite was discovered in 1959, 1960, shortly after the Sputnik and our first satellites went up there. We set up optical and radar tracking stations all over the planet to track these man-made satellites, and they found there was already one up there on a polar orbit. We couldn't do polar orbits for another 30 years. We were only doing equatorial orbits in 1959, 1960. The Black Knight satellite has two nicknames. One, of course, is the Black Knight satellite. The other is the cryogenic box. It became a matter of highest national priority to gain access to the contents of that box up there. Probably by the late 60s with the Apollo space missions, we had enough lift capability to get up that high. It's just below the Van Allen radiation belt, about 22,000 miles high. I know two of its three dimensions, 40 by 70 feet. I don't know the third dimension. Its other nickname is the cryogenic box, which brings up all kinds of questions in and of itself. So you get up there high enough to photograph and measure the docking mechanism. You come back to Earth. You build a docking mechanism. You go back up. You link up. Who wants to be the first one through the door, Jules?
True.
Yeah, right. I mean, how scary would that be? But how exciting. They probably gained access to the contents sometime in the mid to late 70s, and that's just guessing. No doubt whatsoever with the space shuttle and that technology, they've been able to gain access to the contents of the Black Knight satellite, bring it back to Earth, and begin reverse engineering the metallurgy, the electronics, the computers. We don't know, at least I don't know, what they found inside that box, but I have no doubt that they got into it and they started recovering whatever there was to recover from it.
John, do you have a pair of third-generation night vision goggles by any chance?
I've got a night vision scope that's not third gen. I have looked through third gen scopes. It's amazing. Ever look at the sky with one?
Yes, I've seen Ed Grimsley's work, and that's why I was saying, the Black Knight satellite, I believe. There's so many things out there, especially if you look at the night vision goggles, just things zooming around. Who knows what's up there?
Well, if you look at the sky with your naked eye, you'll see stars and then groups of stars, and then you'll see a lot of blank spots where there's nothing. You look at the sky with third-gen night vision, it's stars on top of there are no blank spots. It's like you've never seen the sky before, isn't it, Jules?
That's right, yeah.
And you don't have to look very long before you start seeing meteorites. Meteorites.
Not meteorites doing right angles, though.
I haven't looked that much through third gen, but there are a lot of meteorites, and there may be things up there that going at right angles also. Is that your observation?
Only from the videos I've seen from other people with night vision goggles. I don't actually have a pair.
Well, it's on my list of things to get, and I'll be looking. So it'll be a fun thing to do.
Great. Thanks, John. We've got a question from Romans.
Hi, John. This is Romans 828 is true, but they call me Romans for short.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us all tonight.
Okay.
Now, getting back to the subject of nuclear reactors, I've got a question and then a follow-up. The Earth changes and failure of the electrical grid could cause most to all nuclear reactors in the U.S. to melt down. We are seeing that possibly with nuclear reactors in Japan. Does nuclear meltdown of all reactors due to these changes concern you?
Not really. We had a caller on my show this morning. He's a nuclear engineer, and he's in charge of a nuclear power plant when he's on duty. It's a very responsible position. These plants, especially the more modern ones, have a lot of redundancy built into them, so that no matter what happens, they have a high likelihood of being able to shut it down in a safe manner. Obviously, a catastrophic event such as a terrorist bomb or somebody crashing a big plane into one would disrupt all the backups and the backups and the backups redundancy that they have. He was telling us, for example, that they keep enough cooling liquid on hand that even when what a tsunami does is suck all the water out of the cooling system before it comes back in as a tidal wave. They have enough extra cooling liquid on hand to safely shut down the power plant. It's not a major concern of mine. It is a concern, but they have a lot of redundancy built into these power plants to shut them down seriously for almost any event that you can think of, other than a group of men, armed men, coming in there with explosive devices or something of that nature that just overrides and wipes out all the redundancy safeguards that they have built in.
I see. Now, concerning your safe area in the Ozarks, do you feel that it's reasonably placed to avoid any potential contamination?
Well, as reasonable as it can be. We're not as safe as the fictitious town of Jericho, Kansas.
Yeah.
There is a nuclear power plant right at the northern edge of the Arkansas, Missouri Ozarks in Callaway County, Missouri, at the extreme north edge of the Arkansas, Missouri Ozarks. The prevailing winds go east by northeast. Whatever's downwind or upwind from us, I should say, which would be Oklahoma and Texas. I'd have to research it to see what's out that direction. I'm not aware of nuclear power plants being out that way, but there certainly could be some. So it's not a major concern of mine, no, sir.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Okay, John. Obviously, you were discussing earlier that it's hard to tell the timeline between Phase 2 and Phase 3, but what we can do is we can look at what other people are doing. Along with the Navy, other governments, and some Fortune 500 companies, it seems some celebrities are aware of the coming Earth changes, an example being George Lucas talking about 2012 to a stunned Seth Rogen for 20 minutes. So along with your inside sources, are you watching the activities of politicians and celebrities to gauge if the Earth changes are about to escalate?
I don't. I mean, no, I don't watch what these people do. I rely on my private sources.
When you say
my private sources in the military and in the private sector that I know and I trust.
Okay, thank you. Chuck, you have a question for John?
Yes, John, I'm kind of wondering. There are quite a few people out there that are considered kind of watchers, and you're one of them. I'm one of them, and a number of people I know are watchers. Will we be the ones that get the forewarning, letting us know when it's time to dig in or bug out, whatever their choice is, based on events? Right.
Well, the time to dig in is really past. If you're going to build a steel reinforced concrete shelter and have a commercial contractor do it for you, you're looking at about a 1 year lead time, depending on the size of it and how busy the contractor is. Getting a contractor to do anything at all, build a garage in 6 months from the time you call them up until the time you're parking your pickup truck inside the garage is about right. So we're basically out of time if you're going to be building anything that involves a construction project. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying time is very short. People, it seems to be part of our American culture. People want to be looking for a date, and then they'll do something once they got a date. Well, it's a time frame, and we're in the time frame right now. And given the enormity, people need to just convince themselves it's real and get busy.
Well, let me ask you something. One little quick question here, John. It's came to my attention that through a neighbor that does a lot of construction work for a lot of municipalities has contracted with a number of local towns to build swimming pools. And my question is, have you heard possibly of something like this being used as like a water disaster relief for local areas? It's just kind of an oddity that's kind of popped up to me lately.
I'm not aware of that personally. No, no, I'm not. Municipal water, a swimming pool, even a fairly good-sized swimming pool, is not a whole lot of water unless it's a massive swimming pool. But your average Olympic-sized swimming pool for a city would be not much water at all.
Well, I appreciate that, John. It's kind of something that's really just kind of struck me as odd.
Yeah, for 2 or 3 families, a swimming pool would be a huge amount of water, but for a city, it's nothing.
Yeah, 20,000 gallons wouldn't last long with
No.
30,000 people.
No.
Not at all. Well, thank you, John. I'll hand you back to Jules now.
Okay.
Thanks, Tom.
Yes, certainly. It's Diane B here. There's been some information coming out on the net over the last little while that scientists now appear to have made a mistake when they were looking at the possibility of solar flares affecting the Earth. In other words, they're kind of thinking, well, maybe they are going to. Now, while they're saying out that it's going to cost about $2 trillion to fix the electrical system, and it could take 10 years, and there might be no fuel at the pumps, and maybe the electrical grids are going to go down, they're not telling the people that planes will fall out of the sky and satellites will fall out of the sky and ships will have no navigation and lifts won't work and trains, especially the high-speed ones that run on electricity, will just crash, as well as the everyday things like hospitals and generators that won't work. Do you have any intel on what the government is planning to do, if anything, to make people aware that they don't figure this out for themselves? I mean, this sounds like a very dangerous situation.
Well, it is, Diane. There's been quite a few mainstream stories about the threat posed by these solar flares, coronal mass ejections. I don't know that very many people pay attention to them, but there has been mainstream attention. But your question, reading between the lines here, what you're saying in so many words is that once the system's down, let's back up a moment here. When we have a localized power grid outage, everything else works. And men typically will stay at motels and hotels and restaurants outside the damaged area, maybe 5 or 10 miles, and drive in to do repair work and then return there at night. And they have a complete support system outside the damaged area that's completely functional with everything up and running. When everything's down, then what we need to work to do the repairs is broken itself. And that's it's hard to comprehend that situation, but when everything is broken, what you need to do the repairs is broken. So it's a systematic situation where we've got everything we use took decades to put in place, many decades to create, and it was created a step at a time with one thing building on top of the other. When it all goes down at once, we'll be starting from scratch, and we won't have the necessary tools to repair what's broken because they'll be broken also.
Exactly.
I hope that makes sense.
Well, it does, but I mean, the thing that really concerned me is the fact that there's a lot of things that are going to happen that people should be told about, in my opinion, anyway, about flying and trains and.
Well, a train will probably just coast to a stop. Airplanes get hit by lightning all the time and don't fall out of the sky. A direct hit from lightning is a massive source of energy. But the airplane is not grounded, and typically they take very little damage and they don't crash. So I'm not aware of any aircraft crashing from a lightning strike. So I don't know that that's that much of an issue. Trains go ahead.
Control of everything. It's the electrical, computerized control of vehicles, planes that was taken out by a solar flare CME. Right.
Well, there's a lot of controversy about what a CME can do and what it cannot do, and it may come down to what's grounded and what's not grounded. Electricity has to pass on through before it can do damage. There's some belief that a lot of things that aren't grounded, like vehicles sitting on top of rubber tires, for example, may not take as much damage as we initially thought. What happens is beyond our control anyway. But getting back to your original question, a good analogy might be, if your automobile needs to be repaired, you take it to the shop and get it fixed. Well, what if the shop is broken and not fixable? And that's what we're looking at, is the shop will be broken. I'm not talking about just cars and trucks here, but everything. Our entire infrastructure is at risk. And what we need to make the repairs won't work either.
Yeah, it's really going to affect an awful lot of people, and there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be totally...
Well, we'll go back to the 1890s without the infrastructure of the 1890s. Anything with an internal combustion engine is at risk, which means basically everything, everything electronic and everything with a modern internal combustion engine. In the 1890s, we had no electricity, we had no internal combustion engines. We had a complete working infrastructure using steam engines and horsepower and people power. That's all gone. What's left is pretty much in museums. So going back to the 1890s without that infrastructure would be a hardship beyond belief.
Yes. Good idea to be prepared. Thank you very much, John. That's amazing. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, John. John is from the libertyman.com. John, the next question we have is, there are currently a lot of news and reports of two suns currently circulating in the alternative media from China to Sri Lanka and to Holland. What do you think of all these reports?
I got my friend Lucas. You need to interview Lucas, by the way. I can give you his contact information. He sent me a video from China TV about the two suns. I forwarded it to my friend who grew up in China, and she translated for me. Apparently, it was a mirage from a lake. Now, obviously, if there was two suns in China, you could see two suns anywhere on the planet. So that's what's going on. These are optical illusions, mirages. The Chinese think it was a bad omen that they could see two suns. However, there are mainstream stories that we will wake up one morning this year and see two suns in the sky, attributing that to the star Betelgeuse, not spelled the same way as the movie, exploding, going nova, as they say. I talked to Professor McCanney about this. He says typically when a star goes nova and explodes, you can see it anywhere from a few days to maybe 3 weeks. 4 weeks is kind of pushing the limit to be able to see a star that's exploded. The mainstream news stories say we'll be able to see this exploding star as two suns for several months, 3 or 4 months. Professor McCanney agrees with me that this may very well be a cover story for the 10th planet to give people something to believe and not be fearful when they see it.
Okay, thank you. Chuck, you have a follow-up question, please?
Yes, sir. I've got a question that's kind of nagged on me for a number of years, John, and getting heavier every day. Your opinion on chemtrails, do you think they are to shield us from like gamma rays that are coming into Earth, UV rays?
More and more that makes sense, Chuck, than anything else. The people spraying these chemtrails, they have children and spouses.
Yes, exactly.
And cousins and aunts and uncles underneath this stuff, breathing this stuff. I'm not sure you could convince people to do something harmful to the ones that they care and love. Barium is well known in the medical business to absorb radiation. If you're going to be taking an X-ray, they fill you up with barium, don't they?
Yes, sir.
And that's one of the things they're spraying. So I'm certainly getting more and more confident that is in fact what they're doing. They're attempting to protect us from these harmful radiation coming from space. That seems to be the case.
Well, that's kind of my conclusions too, John. That and all of the solar activity, we've just been absolutely blitzed with them. But
these guys, when they park these planes and get out of the plane, they're breathing the same air the rest of us, aren't they?
Exactly. Yeah. But I appreciate your thoughts on that, John, very much so. Back to
Dead
Julie.
Poet. Thank you, Chuck. Dead Poet, you have a question for John?
Hello, John. Thank you again very much for coming on, giving us your time. You've mentioned movies. I'm also, I like to watch movies and sort of look for, things in them, symbolism, possible messages, things like that. The movie Waterworld, when the movie actually came on, it didn't really say a whole lot about what caused it, but the original trailer, it started out by saying that the sun was our demise, and it says that the temperatures climbed and all the ice melted and the land started to vanish. Is the way the movie played out a type of scenario you think to be possible in our future, given that they sometimes give us clues? And that's, even perhaps something short, we could maybe even go into an ice age. So do you see a Waterworld type of scenario?
I've seen the film also. It's a well done science fiction film. Kevin Costner, right? Anyway,
yeah.
With gills behind his ears.
Yes, with gills. Yes, the new and improved Kevin Costner.
Kevin Costner with gills. I don't see that precise scenario being played out. If all the ice in the Antarctic melted and all the ice in Greenland, which is the two main sources of non-floating ice, if they all melted, the ocean levels would come up substantially, but it would not inundate all the land masses on the planet. There's not enough water to do that. The water that the Navy's concerned about is what we talked about earlier, the disruption of that bulge at the equator, which would not inundate all areas. It would inundate areas close to the existing oceans, up to about 400 feet above sea level. I think that's about it. Yeah, I think that's about it.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, Romans, what's your question for John?
John, rumor has it that the Astro Patriot is being harassed because he may have uncovered that the information on the comet Elenin is a cover for the brown dwarf. What do you think of the theory that Planet X, Destroyer, Wormwood, etc., is being covered up as the comet Elenin? And we were wondering what you thought about that.
Okay, well, I'm not familiar with this person, Astro Patriot, so I can't even comment on that. A lot of people are paying attention to Elenin. It's not real high on my list of things to do. The first three letters of the word are kind of interesting, though, ELE, which could have another meaning, extension level event. I don't believe it's Wormwood or Planet X or the Destroyer. That's my personal belief. I don't believe it's time for that to be on the table yet. I do have private sources telling me that amateur astronomers may be seeing it as soon as this coming summer in the southern hemisphere. They can't see it yet, and that this coming fall we could have very severe consequences from the 10th planet, Destroyer Wormwood, getting deeper into our solar system. I don't talk about this a whole lot publicly. It's too close to naming dates, and I don't like to name dates until I've got even firmer information. The only real date I had that was firm was December 31st, 2009, the date the government gave themselves to get their main preparations complete. And of course, that date's come and gone, and they continue to make their preparations. The majority of what they did was in the 80s and early to mid 90s, in terms of building massive structures and really big, expensive infrastructure. That's all done and well complete for many years. So I don't know what else to tell you, sir. The Elenin, we're watching it. I don't believe it is a 10th planet.
Okay, well, I sure appreciate your thoughts on that.
Diane, you have a question for John?
Yes, I do. While there's much discussion about December 2012, there are people, including Patrick Gerrell, who we interviewed a wee while ago, saying October this year could be a serious time based on the Mayan numbers as far as sunspots go. And is there any indication that the sun could cause serious disruption before 2012?
Well, the whole December 21st, 2012 thing is disinformation, in my opinion. The film 2012 was a multi-million-dollar Hollywood production. Some of the websites devoted to 2012. You look at them, they look like something IBM or Bill Gates would create. You look at mine, it's obviously, it's nice, but it doesn't look like something Bill Gates or IBM would create. That date's too far into the future. The fall of this year, 2011, we certainly are at risk. I have private sources telling me that we're at risk in the fall of 2011.
Thank you about that.
And the year 2012 doesn't exist in the Mayan calendar. That's our calendar, the Georgian calendar. The Georgian calendar has the year 2012. The Mayan calendar does not. You have to be able to reconcile the calendar before you can make any sense of Velikowski did with each other of itself. Elders, I'm in close to Western Cherokee, and apparently native peoples have similar prophecies similar to the Hopis. And the Hopi prophecies by themselves are scary enough. They don't give a date, though. They give a time frame, and in fact, 3 or 4 Hopi elders went to the United Nations in the early 1950s to warn the planet, and they were received and treated with respect, but basically nobody paid attention to them. That was, 60 years ago.
I remember reading about that. Well, thank you very much. That's very an interesting perspective. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jemdi, can you ask your question, please?
Yeah, hi, John. Are the sun's magnetic poles in the process of shifting?
I have no information on that, my dear. I really don't. Our poles, there's been a lot of attention. The Tampa airport closed for a few days, about a month ago, to repaint the numbers. And people, I can't tell you how many phone calls and emails I got because of it. And what I got to tell these people is you're not around aviation very much. Anybody and everybody around aviation the past 20 years knows that the Federal Aviation Administration has had to order the repainting of numbers on runways all over the United States because of the shift in magnetic north. That's not news. What happened in Florida became news for reasons I don't quite understand, but for people in aviation, it's a no big deal. The magnetic north has been shifting and shifting dramatically for decades. That news story out of Florida became news, but it wasn't news to anybody in aviation.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Big Medicine, can you ask your question of John?
Yes, John, I know you're a James Bond fan, so this has a little bit to do with that. Gary McKinnon, the British hacker, hacked into a lot of U.S. Navy and NASA computers a few years back and saw a lot of evidence that points to a secret space program. He saw listings for ships that are not registered, non-terrestrial officers. Does the secret space program, in your knowledge, does that play into some sort of moonraker scenario of the elite trying to get off the planet?
Well, I don't believe the elite have any plans of leaving the planet. I have seen no evidence of that. The space shuttle is big enough to put a school bus inside the cargo hold. It's huge. And they've been carrying up these large, heavy cargoes for what, not quite 30 years? You can haul a lot of stuff in that period of time. NASA, of course, is the military. They take along some school teachers and scientists occasionally, but it's the military. And the military by nature is secret about their doings. Dr. Deagle, who I co-host his third hour every Friday, he talks a lot about the weapons we've got, space-based weapons that can take out the Russians or Chinese anytime we choose to. I've heard from private sources that we do have some really powerful weapons, space-based weapons. As far as unregistered ships and so forth, well, that would be part of keeping secrets, wouldn't it? I'm not sure what a non-terrestrial officer is. What is a non-terrestrial officer?
I guess somebody who's assigned to a ship not on this planet. Yeah, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Gary McKinnon case. The United States really wants to extradite him here and try him, and they're trying to keep him in England. Supposedly he saw a lot of stuff.
Well, who's trying to keep him in England?
His attorneys, a lot of private sector folks are trying to keep him there so he doesn't get extradited.
Okay. I'm not familiar with the story now. It sounds like a fascinating story. So he hacked into some Department of Defense computers and released the stuff publicly?
He didn't actually release much publicly. He gave some interviews because he got busted, and they really came after him. And he didn't actually even cause any damage. He found computers that just happened to be open and snooped in there looking for free energy and aliens and all that stuff. And he found who knows what he hasn't. I'm sure he hasn't said everything that he saw, just to be on the safe side. But he did see a lot of evidence pointing to a definite secret space program. I really appreciate your.
He's under arrest right now in England, being held by British authorities?
He's under house arrest in England.
House arrest. Well, that's kind of like arrest, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you're going to be arrested, it's best to be in your own house, right?
I would. That's where I would like to be.
You can get a pizza delivered and you can take a hot bath and not be disturbed, yeah. Okay. Well,
thank you, John.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Diane B., you have a question.
Yeah, just a quick one, thanks. Can you make some comments on preparing undergrounds to survive sunspot activity? I guess I can add in there now nuclear possibilities and a possible hit by Planet X or Nibiru.
Okay.
I know you sort of covered a bit of this before, but yeah.
Right, Diane. The preoccupation of the government and Fortune 500 companies with underground facilities didn't make much sense to me until really when I started talking to Major Ed Dames, the remote viewer, and coming to understand the true nature of a coronal mass ejection and how bad it can be. It would create surface temperatures of about 140 degrees for anywhere from 1 to 3 hours. The radiation could go on for days, if not weeks. Very severe radiation. It can cause cancer and all kinds of very serious problems for people. With that in mind, I can see why the powers that be, these governments and Fortune 500 companies, would want steel-reinforced concrete structures underground for protection from those events. Now, in addition, of course, there's 200-mile-an-hour winds and the deluges of rain. When we go through the tail, Planet X will probably have a tail like a comet. We'll probably get smacked with literally millions of barrels of oil, a deluge of water. These comet tails are known to have both, and there's certainly a lot of evidence of that having happened in the past. So a steel-reinforced concrete structure underground starts making a lot of sense once you look at all the effects.
Yeah. Do we have any idea of the depth? How deep you'd need to go?
Well,
just the average person, if they wanted to go under for protection.
Once you've got 3 feet of earth, you're pretty much set against the heat. As far as radiation, I'm not sure how bad the radiation could get. If you want complete protection from a nuclear event, a man-made nuclear event, you'd want 10 feet of earth to be really, really safe. And I would hope 10 feet of earth would be more than enough to deal with a coronal mass ejection and the radiation from that kind of event. A natural cave would be good. A building with a steel roof to reflect the radiation and help you deal with the heat, that would be good as well. Underground structure with at least 3 feet of earth would be a real nice thing to have.
Indeed it would. Thank you very much, John.
You're welcome.
Jemdi, do you have a question for John?
Yeah. Hi, John, again. I heard you talk about this on your 2008 video, but you didn't really go into much detail about it. And that is, how does Armageddon, do you feel ties in with Planet X?
Explain. Armageddon, of course, is a plane in Israel with a
the Bible version of Jesus' return.
Okay. Usually when people talk about Armageddon, they talk about the final battle on the plains of Armageddon, which probably would be a place where a final battle could take place. And you're not referring to that. You're talking about the return of our Lord Jesus?
Right. That's what I'm referring to. Right.
Okay. Well, I usually defer the the theological things to people more qualified than myself. I am a believer. I do, I love and trust my Lord on one hand. On the other, I'm no Bible scholar and really don't feel qualified to comment too much on that. I do know that the powers that be want to complete their work before these events stop them also. When these oceans start coming out of their basins, we have 200-mile-an-hour winds and even more severe earthquakes and volcanoes than we've got at the moment, they will be shut down also. They want their they want to have their shiny new world order all complete and ready to go before these events shut them down also.
Okay, right, but the powers that be think that they're Christians, don't they?
Oh, no.
Oh, they don't think they're Christians.
Oh, no. Far from it. Far from it. They don't.
Oh, they just put that out there that they are.
Well, some do. I mean,
because I've heard some do.
Well, look, we got a Muslim in the White House claiming to be a Christian. You know, how bizarre is that? You know,
right.
I asked my Jewish friends, I said, I have a number of Jewish friends, a lot of them are lawyers, and I'll ask them the following question. If you start going to a Baptist church every Sunday for the rest of your life, you'd still be Jewish, wouldn't you? And they say, of course I would. Just because I go to a Baptist church, I'd still be Jewish. And I said, guess what? Barack Hussein Obama can go to a Christian church every Sunday the rest of his life, and he'll still be Muslim. It's the same thing.
Oh. Yeah, I know. I totally agree. Yeah.
I like to call him Hussein Obama, by the way. I just don't even use his first name.
Okay, thank you, John.
Okay.
And John, just follow up from that. Obviously, we've heard a lot about Albert Pike and his visions for 3 world wars. How does that tie in? Do you think there might be a World War III before these Earth changes, or even after it?
Well, we might be in World War II began in the mid-1930s, don't we? But in 1936, 37, 38, when World War II was underway, with China doing what it was doing, and Italy invading Ethiopia, those were the beginning points of World War II, but we didn't know it then, did we? They didn't call it.
No, we didn't. Correct.
It was several years later. So we may be a year or two into World War III already, and it may take hindsight to really show us exactly where World War III began. We're at great risk. I just interviewed this morning the producer of the documentary Agenda, and this gentleman did an excellent job. You need to get this guy and interview him, by the way. An excellent job of documenting the ongoing, continuing communist conspiracy worldwide. The communists love to use proxies. The Vietnam War was a proxy war for Russia. The war right now in Afghanistan is a proxy war for Saudi Arabia, basically for the Wahhabis, who hate us. You know, we're going after the Boy Scouts instead of going after the Marines. That's what's going on in Afghanistan. It's all Saudi Arabian money funding the Al Qaeda. The manpower, the leadership of Al Qaeda is all Saudi Arabian. The philosophy is Saudi Arabian, coming out of the Wahhabi part of Islam, which is the most violent, radical part of Islam, and the most powerful and wealthy part of Islam as well, because they got all that Saudi money behind them. I didn't mean to go down that rabbit trail, but I couldn't help it.
That's okay. And I believe Dead Poet, you've got a question.
Yeah, I do. This is a completely different topic. But what are your thoughts on crossing the galactic center?
I'll defer to Professor McCanny, and he gave response on that last time I spoke with him about this. He says the galactic plane, you're talking about the alignment in the galactic plane? Is that what you're talking about? Yeah,
or you're crossing, exactly, the galactic plane or the galactic equator.
Professor McCanny, who is he's a scientist, he's an astrophysicist, he says, don't worry, be happy. It's nothing. It's nothing. When these planets line up on the galactic plane, nothing's going to happen. That's according to the astrophysicist, Professor James McCanny. And I'll take that to the bank. So let's move on.
Cool. Thank you.
Big Medicine, you've got another question?
Indeed, John. I'd like to hear your thoughts on if you believe Chinese/Latin American, even Russian invasion is possible after a major U.S. collapse. And even tying into that, I was wondering if you were aware there's been reports that the Chinese are training large amounts of their troops in horse-mounted cavalry and also the use of carrier pigeons. Are they anticipating some sort of Carrington event type of scenario?
Well, what is a Carrington event? I'm not sure what that is.
Major solar disruption of electrical grids that happened.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, that's okay. That's the Carrington event. I think it was November, I interviewed Command Sergeant Major Page, who just got back from a 1-year tour of duty in Central Africa, intelligence gathering. And we spent most of the time talking about the People's Liberation Army activity in China, People's Liberation Army activity other places. One of the things he told me is that the People's Liberation Army is building right now a 1 million horse cavalry in Mongolia. Basically recreating what Genghis Khan did so many centuries ago, which is kind of plays into many of us. We've wondered for decades where it talks in the Bible about this large cavalry coming in from the east. And up until I found out about this current event of the People's Liberation Army building a 1 million man, 1 million horse cavalry, it didn't make sense in the light of modern tracked and wheeled vehicles and aircraft and helicopters. What is in the Bible? It talks about a cavalry coming from the east, doesn't it? Well, apparently there's going to be a cavalry, and it will come from the east, and it's being built right now. As terms of a invasion of this country by Russia and China, I think they'll be invited in. They will be an invasion, but they will be invited in. We'll have a crisis. Possibly 1 or 2 nuclear devices going off in this country, maybe a complete collapse of the economy, leading to social disruption. And officially, as far as anything is concerned officially, the Russians and Chinese are our allies, not our enemies. And they'll be invited in. They're already in Mexico. I've spent a number of hours interviewing a Mexican journalist, Mr. Alexander Bachman, about the Chinese presence in Mexico. I've talked to men who've been to Russian military bases in Mexico. And there's been a number of cross-border incidents of Asian men in military uniforms with weapons crossing our southern border and shots being fired. I don't know if they were training operations or what they were, but these things have happened, and even mainstream media has documented them. They're also in Canada as well. These areas are massive. These areas, outlying areas in Canada and Mexico, are massive areas of thousands of square miles where there's almost no people. And yes, I believe this will happen. I can't say when. I can say the equipment, supplies, and the men are all pre-positioned in Mexico, in Guatemala, in Canada, waiting for the signal, and when the signal comes, they'll come in.
Indeed, China also controls the Panama Canal as well, so can move a lot of ships through there.
Absolutely. They also control the train and all 3 ports.
Indeed. Thank you very much, John.
Okay.
John, sorry, just a quick follow-up. I know you've AC Griffiths asks you this question every time you actually go on his show, but so he's always asks you about the Jericho scenario. Do you think
we may never find out or know the difference between what's a genuine terrorist event and what's a false flag? History has taught us that they'll take advantage. Look at Pearl Harbor, for example. Roosevelt knew Pearl Harbor was going to happen well before it happened. His prior knowledge, does that make it a false flag operation? Well, it was a genuine attack by the Japanese Imperial Navy, but Franklin Roosevelt knew about it beforehand. In fact, I do private consultations. I have a client in Boston, personally acquainted with a either a granddaughter or a great-granddaughter of Franklin Roosevelt, who says that the whole family's taking a lot of heat now because of the public awareness of their grandpa or great-grandpa having prior knowledge of the attack on Pearl Harbor. So when an attack comes, Jules, it will come. And as I tell people, us barefoot peasants, we need to deal with the consequences, regardless of if it's a genuine terrorist attack or a false flag terrorist attack.
Correct, yeah. It doesn't really matter how it was instigated. We have to live with the results, correct?
Absolutely.
Yes. Jem, do you have a question?
Yeah, John, how did you get involved with exposing these government cover-ups, and what made you want to get involved in this?
Okay, well, I graduated from military intelligence school in 1967 in Fort Holabird, Maryland. Got assigned as an intelligence analyst to Vietnam and psychological warfare, getting there the first week of September 1967. My job, Monday through Friday, 8 hours a day, was to conduct classified studies of the Vietnam War. I attended a classified briefing every morning at 0800, Monday through Friday. I picked up documents from the CIA, from Army Intelligence, from a couple of other places, the 9th Infantry Division, and I worked shoulder to shoulder with a Vietnamese national who was my interpreter. I was 20, he was 20. We got to be pretty good friends. By the end of the first 3 or 4 weeks, I figured out that the war our people thought I was fighting was two different wars.
Yeah.
Two different wars. And by the end, within days of getting in Vietnam in September of '67, the men I worked with at the time was the 19th Psychological Company, and we became the 10th Psychological Operations Battalion later that fall. They were telling me, John, there's this Chinese celebration of New Year. They call it Tet, near the end of January. And they're going to hit us. There's going to be an attack. They're going to hit us hard. They're going to hit us with everything they got. And so I had prior knowledge of the Tet offensive 4 months before the fact, 5 months before the fact, and started getting ready for it. And the first night and morning of the Tet offensive, I'm laying on my belly there, and the bullets are flying, and there's rockets and mortars and all this stuff going on. And I'm thinking, I've known about this for 5 months. How come we don't have enough ammunition? How come we don't have enough food to feed our guys? This is not a secret that we were going to be attacked.
Wow.
And it was many years later, and I think it was around 83 or 84, that CBS did a special on the Tet offensive and the battle between Westmoreland's intelligence people and the CIA regarding what was going to happen during the Tet offensive. And Westmoreland's people were saying, it can't happen, it won't happen. And the CIA was saying, yeah, it's going to happen, you're going to get hit hard. And it was a major deal, and Westmoreland threatened to sue CBS. They settled out of court. But the CIA had it right. Now, of course, being where I was down the Mekong Delta, I had no knowledge of that battle between these various high-level intelligence services. I was just down there in the trenches finding out what I found out from my daily work. At the end of the Tet offensive, I worked with several men. We were going to expose the truth about what was going on in our part of the war. The Army found out about it and basically shut us down. But I continued that work. When I got back to the States, I was assigned to Special Forces at Bragg, and I started making speeches about the war, telling about what was really going on, the religious nature of a large part of it, which almost no Americans knew about then or now. Religion had a very massive role in how the war was conducted and the outcome of the war. The Army was not real happy with me, to say the least. But I continued making those speeches and being active until the war ended in 1975. I went on with my life and became a homicide detective. And then in the late 80s, I got active politically in pro-gun matters, in the Second Amendment matters. And one thing led to another to where by 1995 I had my own radio show. And as I say, the rest of it's history.
Okay, great. Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
Diane B., you've got a question.
Have you been told to keep quiet by any governmental agencies? And if not, why do you think they're allowing you to continue speaking out like you are?
Well, if I was Professor Harrington, the supervising astronomer of the United States Naval Observatory, talking about Planet X, I'd probably be dead. But I'm not. When I was in the Army, speaking out about the Vietnam War, this was I was very young. I was only, 21 years old. The men I was working with in the Special Forces, most of them, my commanding officer, Colonel Johnson, he when I met with him the day before I got discharged, he said, "John, I've got a son your age." These men all had 15, 16, 18 years invested in the Army in this career, looking towards a pension and retirement. They could not jeopardize what they'd spent their lifetimes working towards to speak out and do the right thing. It's just, for them, it wasn't worth it, and they knew it wouldn't change anything, which, of course, it wouldn't change anything. I, on the other hand, I was 21 years old. I was not going to make a career of the Army, and they all knew what I was doing, and none of the Green Berets I worked with, not a single one, said, "Moore, we don't want you doing that. Moore, you're doing the wrong thing." I was doing it with their implied consent, because they could have transferred me out of the Green Berets into some truck repair company or canteen repair company or something in a heartbeat. In a heartbeat. These men were every one of them was a Vietnam vet. Everyone was a Vietnam vet. One of these men, it was so tragic. He had a letter he carried in his left shirt pocket that he would take out and read once or twice a day from his buddy who had died in Vietnam. And the anger in this man, you could cut it with a knife. He was just so burned up with anger. All these men were walking wounded emotionally and psychologically, every one of them. The only thing they were looking forward to was getting out of the U.S. Army. That was it. The only thing they were looking for. I, on the other hand, had no pension to look forward to in the Army, no retirement, no vested interest in keeping my mouth shut. And I was fairly articulate for a 21-year-old and told a pretty good story. And it was fun getting out, going to the university campuses and talking to people and letting them know what was really going on in this war. For example, the religious nature of the war. There was only one general in the entire Vietnamese army who was not Catholic. Catholics were maybe, no more than 10 or 15% of the population on a good day. No more. The majority population in South Vietnam was Buddhist. And the French came there in the 1860s, and Vietnamese people figured out pretty quick that if they converted to Catholicism and took up with the French, they would get well-paying jobs and get good educations and have positions of trust and respect within their communities, working for the French colonial government. Well, that was still going on when we were there. The Catholics were running everything of any consequence. The Buddhists, who were the majority, didn't have a chance. They'd get to be a low-ranking officer or a sergeant. Most of them, of course, were privates and corporals. But the Catholics ran everything, and the Buddhists knew that there would never be a chance for a Buddhist to reach a high level of trust and respect within the South Vietnamese government. So why should they risk their lives for it? You look at those battles over there. They all had Vietnamese mothers, every one of them. But the Viet Cong had something to fight for. The South Vietnamese soldiers did not. They were fighting for a corrupt regime that by design, kept the Buddhists out of all important positions of any consequence.
That's amazing. Thanks very much, John. It's obvious where all the money.
Yep. Thank you. You just cut out there, Diane, but thanks for the question. John, and also we thank you for speaking out because it's, as everybody knows, it's far easier to let someone else speak out than to do it yourself, and for you speaking out, we thank you. John, as we end this discussion, we wanted to ask you one final question from Big Medicine. Big Medicine.
Yeah, John, your original timeline was to be ready and waiting by December 2010. Now that we've gone past that day, as a father and a grandfather, what preparations have you made for your family, and what do you say is the must-have basics for people to prepare for this upcoming collapse?
Okay, well, that's a pretty comprehensive question. I have a 36-year-old daughter and 3 grandchildren that live in Seattle, Washington. Thank goodness my daughter was living with me in September 2001, and she came to realize that her father wasn't quite as crazy as she thought when she saw what I did to deal with all that. Her and her family and her husband are on alert that if I give them a call to basically drop everything, get on a plane, and come to be with me in the Ozarks. I have sufficient housing for all of them. I have several years' supply of food stored, a never-ending supply of water where we happen to be, medical supplies, firearms and ammunition, of course, communications equipment, and enough garden seeds to have a very large garden. I've pretty much put in a shelter that I believe is sufficient to get us to what's coming at us, a steel reinforced concrete building with a commercial metal roof on it. I think we're pretty well set here. I've got limited resources financially, but within those limited resources, I've been able to, over a period of time, put together some infrastructure and supplies and equipment that I think will be adequate. We won't be living a life of luxury, but it'll be a life and it'll be okay. We'll even have a couple of wringer washers. It's something a lot of people don't think about. How do you do laundry when you don't have hot and cold running water under 40 pounds pressure? It's no small thing. You'll end up doing 1 hour of laundry a day or 1 full day of laundry a week. It's a massive labor undertaking. I recommend people get at least 2 gravity-feed water filters, minimum, at least 1 30 caliber rifle and 500 rounds of ammunition for each adult over the age of 16. Cast iron cook pots and skillets and cast iron lids, no glass lids. You can use them on open fires. You can use them indoors. You need carrying capacity, a truck, preferably diesel if you're not in an extreme northern area, a truck or a full-size van, so you can haul people and supplies and equipment. Emergency shelter in the form of heavy canvas 4-season tents. These little nylon tents they sell for weekend camping, they won't last for more than a few months out in the ultraviolet. If you're stocking a lot of food, don't have a lot of money, you're probably going to use bulk grains. The general formula is 900 pounds per person per year, a little bit more for teenage boys and girls, properly stored so that when the larva hatches out, it will die rather than destroy your grain. Pack it in the CO2, dry ice, or nitrogen is probably the 2 easiest ways. You need a medical kit, and you need the skills to go with it. First aid training from the Red Cross, your local junior college, fire department, first aid training, a comprehensive medical kit equal to your skill level. You need to buy your boots, trousers, shirts, hats, and gloves from the same place the farmers and construction workers get their clothing, boots, hats, and gloves. You're going to be outdoors a lot doing hard manual labor. You need to be able to protect your body, your hands, your feet, and head, and so forth. And be sure you've got long sleeve, light-colored shirts because this sun's going to be brutal for the foreseeable future. Vacuum-packed Heritage Garden seeds. A good place to get them is Baker Creek Garden Seeds down in Mansfield, Missouri. They have a lot of Heritage Garden seeds. You're going to need a reference library, books and books and books. I've got a list of 10 books at my website, thelibertyman.com. A couple of books I recommend. They're Dare to Prepare by Holly Deo, Dare to Prepare by Holly Deo, and the other one is Making the Best of Basics by James Stevens with a V. James Stevens, Making the Best of Basics. I like to recommend Plan B for transportation, the Paratrooper bicycle. I do offer those on my website. They're full-size folding bikes, a lot better than walking. Communications. You need to be able to intercept all the local emergency services, fire department, police department, sheriff's department, so you'll know in real time what's going on rather than guessing. One of the things you'll find out if you're in a serious situation and you don't know what's going on, your mind will take you to the worst possible scenario instantly. You need a good quality scanner, a Uniden Bearcat scanner to intercept those frequencies. You need the skills of a ham radio operator to talk to your loved ones when the phones won't work. All it takes for the phones not to work is system overload, too many phone calls at the same time, which happens in most cities about 3 o'clock, 3:30 when all these kids get out and get on their cell phones. And last but not least, a good quality radiation detection device. We were talking about that a few hours ago on Dr. Deagle's show, and I was saying this is not a test. This is not a test. We have radiation going to the atmosphere right now in Japan. It could be in the United States as quickly as 2 days from now. We don't know how much. It's unknown at the moment, but we do know it will be there. Radiation detection equipment, nutraceuticals to displace the radiation from your thyroid especially. That's where radiation accumulates more quickly and more readily is in your thyroid. You need the right nutraceuticals to do that and take care of that. So that's a quick outline there, sir. And obviously it's real basics. I was in the Philippines 3.5 years ago doing this presentation on No Need for Panic. I was at the home of the former president of the Bank of the Philippines. Very gracious people, very wealthy people. We were about 2,000 feet above sea level overlooking the ocean. There were several islands out in front of us. And we were in question and answers like we're doing here. And my host, they said, John, who's going to survive this thing? I pointed the next island over, a very lush tropical island. I said, here's who's going to survive this. Those barefoot peasants over there on that next island, they had machetes, cast iron cook pots, grass huts, and not much else, because you know their lives aren't going to change. And my host got real quiet. They knew their lifestyle, which was very luxurious, was dependent on two things, digits in the computer of their bank and electricity. And once those two things are gone, their lifestyle's gone.
John, thank you very much for that.
You're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, John. And probably just in addition to that was and a group of like-minded people, because you can't do everything yourself.
Well, there's 168 hours a week. Somebody's going to have to be awake all night, every night.
Correct. That's right.
Oh yes.
Thank you so much, John. I hope it's been enjoyable for you as it has been for us.
It was fun.
Yes, your website again, John's website is thelibertyman.com. That again is thelibertyman.com. As the Civil War veteran and orator Robert Greene Ingersoll said, every man who expresses an honest thought is a soldier in the army of intellectual liberty. Unlike a soldier in the U.S. military, the thoughts you express today shows that you are a soldier of intellectual liberty, fittingly the Liberty Man. On behalf of Fox and all the members of the WebBot Forum, we thank you, John. May you have many good times to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Jules, and all of you, thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Good night.